future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, yes indeed, it is Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. Yes, it is a new year, and we are back on the eve of the one-year anniversary of the January 6th insurrection. How about that? Yes, welcome to the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko. Cyril, of course, is the progressive columnist from Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer, and this show is joining Out to Coop Live, our Monday evening show, our Monday evening interview show, and our Friday Politics Roundup, in which Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever we get your podcasts. You also should sign up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. You go to cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. You'll have the link right in today's show notes. You can also help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Yes, head on over to patreon.com/rcpress to become a patron and help make this show and all our podcasts possible. You can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already, and smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And make sure you join our Discord server to continue the conversation all week long. We're going to be ramping up our Discord this year. This is one of my goals, I should say. Special shout out once again goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. And check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's with 2 N's. That's @SongADayMan on Twitter. Well, on this week's show, we're going to catch up with Cyril. Cyril, I'm so glad that we're sitting back in these chairs once again. Welcome.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's good to be back. I know we kept missing each other, for the last month. It just, the end of the year can be crazy.
It can be indeed. But here it is, 2022, and we're kind of back right here. So we're going to check in to see what's happening, how his new year went and how his holidays went. So I'm so psyched to be able to do that. We're going to check in on the state of our democracy 1 year out from the violent insurrection on the Capitol building. Sure. We also have COVID cases skyrocketing as kids head back to school following the holiday break. And the 2022 election season starts to heat up while the Bucks County School Board shows no sign of moderating. And there's the breaking scandal at the Upper Bucks Technical School as the board seeks to fire the executive director, Jeffrey Sweda, for, quote, incompetency, intemperance, persistent negligence to performance of duties, willful neglect of duties, and or willful failure to comply with laws and directives. Yes, indeed. And we'll also check in with Cyril to find out what he's got cooking for upcoming columns. So, and Cyril, that's just like scratching the surface of things that are going on these days. We also got, of course, the more banning of books and, and just all sorts of craziness going on. So, but other than that, before we kind of jump into the craziness, how was your break and how was your holidays?
They were really nice, thanks. It was a much needed kind of like rest and reprieve, at least a little bit.
I hear you.
And I think everyone kind of needed it after this, long year, just with the pandemic. In addition to the kind of the elections, the science deniers, the militias, the QAnon conspiracy theorists, et cetera, right? I think hopefully, I'm ready to keep fighting, right? And hopefully everyone at least were able to recharge their batteries to kind of like, fight anew, because the health and state, and if not the existence of our democracy, hangs in the balance in these next few years, and we're living in really dangerous times.
I hear you. And, I like you, I did take some time myself too, just to kind of recharge my batteries, to kind of shut off the social media feeds for, as much as I could, spend time with my family, and just to kind of have a mental break from it all. And, it's something that I think that, as I get a little bit older, I start to kind of finally listened to those folks who are saying, look, you got to take care of yourself. It's like the airplane theory of, of struggle, where you got to put the oxygen mask over your own face before you start helping other people out. I'm glad to see that, so much of our movements these days are really populated with folks who kind of understand the need for self-care, kind of be mindful of kind of not getting out in front of oneself and kind of just getting burnt out, because it looks like we're going to be in this for the long haul.
Absolutely. Yeah. I still haven't figured out how to add more hours to the day yet, though, because I still feel like I don't have enough time to get everything done that I want to do. But
I think it's I think that's a lost cause, my friend. Yeah, well, I keep on thinking it's like, that's why, we just keep on plugging and doing what we can do, and recognize that, everything is not on kind of any one kind of person or small group of people's shoulders, that we do this together, and that's the way we win. That's the way we kind of support each other, and that's the way we keep going. Because, in the face of it, just like you said, I mean, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that, we're really facing a time where our democracy is going to be challenged, and challenged at every level. I mean, not just what we see happening, in Washington, D.C., but what's happening right here in Bucks County. And so we're in it for the long haul now.
Yeah, and I think everyone kind of gets it, right? I mean, you're seeing people kind of online, and then just like what they're doing offline, just staying like really engaged, and realizing that it's going to take, some sacrifice, and commitment and perseverance, to not only block or at least slow down some of these far right efforts to kind of subvert education or democracy or voting rights, but also at the same time to kind of like, push progressive policies, right, that can counter that, not just for the moment, but like you said, for the long haul.
Yeah, and I think that, as we look at I've been troubled a little bit, I have to say, by the way that the national media is kind of really addressing a lot of this stuff. I mean, especially when you get into cable news. I think that, the print journalism is much better on this score. And there's some journalists that are really kind of, starting to do just some, bang up work. I mean, Chris Ullery, for example, at the Bucks County Courier-Times has been doing some great work lately too as well. I mean, he did a great piece on what's happening in the Penridge School District with the kind of, now they're banning books. This Heather Has Two Mommies book. I mean, this is the one that they ordered pulled from the shelves. And this thing has like been around for like 30 years. And there was, when the book first came out, like whatever 30 years ago, there was like a little kerfuffle about that, but then eventually waited. And this has just been around now. It's been, a book about, how to love each other and families. I mean, oh my God, this is crazy. So there is that kind of stuff going on. And on the other hand, you see a lot of people paying attention to, just things about following what Trump is doing. And while that is absolutely critical, I understand there has to be, people need to be held accountable for what happened on January 6th. We cannot take our eye off what's happening down the street, because it seems to me that a lot of the extremism is very consciously shifting to kind of local races. And, so our fight is right here in our backyard. And I think that one of the lessons that we can take away is that, building power is not sending tweets about what's happening in DC, but building power is organizing with, folks within your community in order to take back democracy right in our own backyards. So.
No, absolutely. I actually got to speak with Leslie Newman, who wrote the book Heather Has Two Mommies. So that'll be for my next column, which hopefully should be out either later today or tomorrow.
Awesome.
And yeah, like you were saying, like this faced pushback, when it first came out, obviously, which was in '89, and at the time you had like Republican moral leaders like civil rights opponent and racist Senator Jesse Helms, or like family values charlatan Newt Gingrich, kind of politicizing this book and using it to kind of fan the flames of culture war the culture wars even back then, right? And kind of using Washington and Congress in order to kind of halt progress and kind of like keep these books on the shelves. So it looks like, the junta of the school board, led by Joan Cullen, is just kind of like, using the same playbook that was used 30 years ago. And it's disturbing, right? And what's even, I mean, where's the school's district's leadership, right? Like, what is Superintendent Bolton doing? I mean, to have like, one, there's no transparency. Two, there's seemingly no public pushback coming from him. So either this is like a profile on cowardice, or he's like a true believer. Right.
I think it's slightly different. I wouldn't even say it was cowardice as much. At least from my perspective, I think this is one of the problems of that institutions of all sorts are having right now. Right, is that the idea is that let's just assume for a second that Bolton is not a true believer, and he's done enough in some of these school board meetings that that seems that he is not on board with the kind of the ideological extremism of, say, Joan Cullen and other folks in the Penn Ridge School District and some of the more extreme members, but he's an administrator, right, that tends to want to kind of administrate and not take a position and kind of keep his board happy and all this kind of stuff. And look, I mean, I think that we're at a time when people have, in order to defend the institutions, whether it's school, whether it's media, that people have to take a position. And that position is not Democrat-Republican position, but it's a pro-democracy position, right? It is a pro-kids position, which means things like, you have access to all sorts of knowledge. You don't try to censor their lives, right? It means that you got to kind of like push down on extremism, right? And say, no, this does not have a place within our society. So people like Bolton, which blows my mind too as well. I mean, I'm always more likely to kind of say the guy's a freaking coward for not kind of standing up for this stuff. But I could also say, look, he's afraid for his job or whatever. But look, that's what it's going to take. We're going to need leaders in positions like this to push back publicly, because especially what happens, I think that if he's going to lose any respect of people within the community, because, people have been showing up to these school board meetings now. They've been showing up to Central Bucks school board meetings and pushing back against the transphobia stuff. They've been showing up at the Penn Ridge School District meetings and basically saying that, pushing back against this kind of anti-diversity move that is being led by Joan Cullen. And it's going to take a superintendent, right, and principals of schools, right, to stand up and say no and call out these people. Otherwise, we're just, the school board is gonna rue the day, and these people are going to be willing collaborators.
Yeah, I mean, for me though, I think he like showed his true colors with the whole Turning Point USA thing, right? So like he couldn't even be bothered to return phone calls or a certified letter from the Anti-Defamation League, about this group, which has ties to like extremists, racists, and hate, which counter the values, right, of inclusion that public schools must adhere. And so we're seeing that these values of inclusion being undermined again because the Joan Cullen and the school board want to exclude anything outside of white heterosexual identity politics from the school, right? So I have very little faith that he's someone that's willing to take a stand on principle. And you would think, like, yes, it's tough. Like I'm sure they would try to get rid of him if he actually
totally
did. At the same time, if I was like in a school district, I would want someone like that's willing to fight for the kids and to fight for what's right, to come into my district and protect it.
Absolutely. Because, like, I mean, right now, there is no organized institutional voice that's pushing back against what the school board is doing. And this is where you do need leadership. And that's got to be either it's got to, and we're not getting it from it hasn't come from the leadership of PSEA, although that is beginning to change a little bit now. But you have the teachers unions got to push back, right? Or you have the administration of, the Penridge School District, like David Bolton, push back, right? Or you have, the county Democratic Party push back. I mean, there's got to be some pushback against this, but we're just not getting it from our, people who are supposed to be doing their job. I mean, they're elected to kind of defend us all, and it's not happening. So I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to be extraordinarily as level-headed as I possibly can about this, right? Because look, my kids are in this school, right? And it turns my stomach what is happening in the Penridge School District. And like my kids are going back to school in the midst of like one of the worst parts of the pandemic, and there's no masks, right, to be worn, right? My son is like one of the few kids in his classes that's actually wearing a mask, right? I know people that have been exposed to COVID and they're sending their kids into school, and they don't need to say anything. There is absolutely no accountability whatsoever. And they put out these policies that are a freaking joke to say that, hey, if you're exposed, you should follow these things, but they're not doing it. Everything is falling apart, and we're sitting around here pretending that everything's okay. And I mean, I don't know where to turn at this point to try to push back. I mean, again, look, parents are organizing, community members are organizing, they're pushing back in here, but I feel like I'm leaving out this little bit of room to try to have some effect on the superintendent at the very least to do the right thing at this point. And maybe that's just going to be a lost cause, and maybe that we're just going to have to start to call for his removal and to get somebody in here that's actually going to do the right thing. I don't know.
But then they would have to go through the board. Like the board would decide that, right?
But then that becomes a fight, right? But then it becomes a public fight. That parents are demanding that we're going to have some sort of accountability, and then you actually have the open fight and you have the open warfare, basically. Because I don't see any other way that we're going to get some change in Penridge, at least. I mean, Central Bucks is a little bit different, although they're looking like they're trying to double down on stuff over there too as well. So,
did you happen to watch the curriculum meeting?
I did not. I purposely did not. I just couldn't bring myself to watch it this time. Next time around, I will watch it. Do tell.
I mean, I'm only like 40 minutes in, and then I had to give myself a break. But it's just, people need to be worried. They need to start going to these committee meetings as well. You had people complaining about, school board members complaining about, an AP World History class that was teaching about non-Western, focusing on non-Western, societies and cultures and histories. Never mind there's AP US history, AP right. European history. So it's almost like they're mimicking this kind of Western chauvinism that the Proud yep. Boys seem to feel is under attack in the United States, that Western culture and Western values are being attacked by liberals. We shouldn't know about other cultures around the world. A student shouldn't know that. And so that was just something that kind of really stuck out to me. Right. That was just one of the many red flags.
Oh, totally. And, and the not only are they, I mean, I think you put it right. This is Western chauvinism, and this is basically what they're arguing without arguing, right? I mean, this is all their practices are just duplicating what we're seeing coming out of the Proud Boys and kind of like-minded extremist organizations. And the double injury here is that they are going to actually do damage to those kids' ability to even get into certain colleges, right? And to perform well in this. And so those kids are going to be going into college at a disadvantage, right? Compared to kind of other students who are coming out of different districts, right? Because other students have had the exposure to a much wider range of history, of understanding, of knowledges, where what these people seem to be wanting to do is to just try to close it off and pretend that we're back in the 1950s and lynching is still legal. I mean, that's what it seems like they want us to kind of to think about. and that's going to do no damage. I mean, we're lucky enough in our little family where, my kids love to read. We kind of expose them to everything they can. But that's it. Right. I mean, that's what they got, and some of the stuff. And I'll tell you, some of the teachers that my son have and my daughter have are absolutely fantastic. Right. But that's going to become increasingly more difficult for them to do their jobs as the school board starts to clamp down on their curriculum. And I know that some of those teachers are now going to start fearing for their jobs just by teaching the curriculum that they're supposed to be teaching. So.
Sure. And the one teacher, and I'm sorry I forget her name, but she seemed brilliant. She was great at just kind of like answering, they're just kind of really uneducated and uninformed questions and comments. But it's very clear that like what they believe students should be taught is a very narrow, one-sided, white nationalist.
Yes.
Not like white nationalists together, but like white and then nationalist like history that's uncritical. So they're talking about like, oh, we want to teach critical thinking, but these books aren't teaching critical thinking because they're introducing ideas that we don't believe with and don't fall into like the Turning Point USA version of like historical curriculum. And so that's what people need to like recognize and realize. Right. Like that's what they're pushing. That's what they're going to want to put in there. And that's probably their long-term plan. They're just laying the groundwork for that right now by challenging these books by that the teachers who are experts and who've been teaching, these subjects and these materials for years are recommending, because this, far right school board, which gets their news from the One American News Network,
yep,
and it's essentially politically illiterate, they know better, right?
It's crazy, man. It's crazy. Well, now I'm in a bad mood. Oh God, my God. Well, it's just like crazy. I mean, like this week.
I don't know. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I'm just fired up and I'm just ready to go again, because it's just like, this is like kind of like, I don't want to say it's like an existential battle, but what's happening with these schools, like they want to take over the schools because there's a long-term kind of political goals and a long-term political project from that,
right?
And that's to be kind of like raising these students into voting adults who, because of a lack of education and because of a lack of critical thinking skills and because of a lack of any kind of like worldly experience or knowledge, will fall right into their kind of like, right-wing Republican voting bloc.
Yep.
And so that's where we're at. Like, if information is the currency of democracy, they're trying to bankrupt it, right? By keeping these types of materials and these types of these broad curriculums, and these curriculums that offer like depth and breadth about history, not only of the United States but of the world, or of of different like scientific approaches, and the bitter fruit that's going to come from that is just more like January 6th Joan Cullen type thinkers, right? And that's the last thing we need.
No, absolutely. And I think that, you kind of were alluding to this before, is, their idea about saying, we need critical thinking skills. Really what that means is don't think about stuff that challenges us. So it's not, critical thinking means not thinking about it, right? Is to avoid it, to prevent us from actually even seeing those things, which is astounding to me, right? Because you can even imagine, there used to be a certain brand of conservatives, right, that we're also coming out of this kind of Western chauvinist tradition, right? But they weren't afraid, right, of engaging the other side, right? They would say things that I would just fundamentally disagree with, right? And they have really serious problems with, but they would engage in the debate, right? These folks just want to ban stuff. And again, I'm not saying this is completely brand new, but the fact is that now they have control over our school boards, and that's right here in Bucks County, which is a big deal. Which is a real
and it's part of this like this trending anti-intellectualism that's taken over the Republican Party, and I think there's definitely, I think it's been going on for decades, but there's definitely maybe like an uptick, maybe right around the Tea Party or a
Yep.
little before, with Bush, and you'll often also see like, there's this movement within conservatives to kind of disparage like college, right? So
Yep.
like you typically like J.D. Mullane of the Courier Times will write a column once or twice a year about why it's a bad idea to go to college. I'm not saying college is for everyone, right? Like there are other things you can do, but like part of the like college isn't just to kind of like teach you a skill so that you can be like a worker. It's continuing that progress
Right.
from like grade school to junior high to high school about thinking, about how to think, and to have kind of like just more like worldly knowledge so that you can kind of be like a citizen in a functioning democracy.
But that's the key thing right there. That's really what's under assault. This is kind of brings us back to where we started, right? You're talking about the threat against democracy. Is that, because I mean, you start from what we're seeing here in the school boards to, look, yes, your people kind of, there's questioning about how, should you go to college and all this stuff. And there's the conservative version of that, which is, look, you go to college and you're just going to kind of learn how to kind of think like liberals, right? So those are the bad people, right? We're going to brand them as elitist, right? Again, it's the kind of whole kind of trope of the egg-headed intellectual, right? Of the elitist who's out of touch, of the coastal elites and all that stuff, which they've been cultivating now for a couple generations. But now it's kind of really brought to the forefront. But this is where it's dangerous. This is also happening at the time that you've had, 30 to 40 years of neoliberal economic policy that has defunded these institutions, right? And has basically saddled generations with debt. So now you have a whole other group of folks who are questioning the value of college, not because they're afraid to think, right? Because they're questioning, do they actually want to have, like, I don't know, $50,000 worth of debt, $30,000 worth of debt. If you're going on to graduate school or medical school or law school, $200,000 worth of debt that you're going to have to be saddled with and having to pay off and be under the yoke of some bank someplace, right? So you've got these things happening at the same time. The defunding of those institutions. We look at what's happening in newsrooms where they've been stripping out the investigative because, again, the funding for newspapers is not there. The funding for investigative journalism is not there. The funding for education is not there. And so these are threats to democracy there. So you've got a two-pronged assault, the anti-intellectualism, right, that wants to kind of preach Western chauvinism, but then you've got the very structures of a liberal democracy that have been undermined by a kind of systematic defunding, right? So, I mean, this is where it makes it even that much more precarious, right? Where people are desperate. Right. And then you add the pandemic on top of all this, where we're seeing that the absolute collapse of a medical system kind of worth its name. You have the CDC now coming out with the kind of new recommendations, which everyone's looking around. So like, yeah, it just sounds like you just want us to go back to work, right? Not that you want to keep us safe anymore. We've given up on that. Right. We've given up on science. I mean, we're really, I think, up against it. Right, which is, again, this is where I'm thrilled to see how many people are organizing, and this is where I kind of, as I'm saying right now, I get fired up about this stuff too as well, which just says, look, the only thing that we can do at this point is fight. If we believe and what we're supposed to kind of hold. I don't know, we're supposed to cherish, right? Like our democratic institutions, our freedom, right? The protection of our individual rights. Then guess what? Then we got to stand up and fight for it, because there is no white horse coming. There is no, or man on a white horse coming. There's no knight in shining armor that's waiting to come in and kind of ride in and save it for us, right? And if anything about what's happening right now with the Build Back Better bill, with Joe Biden's agenda and everything like this at a national level, if anything, that should be the nail in the coffin of any belief that somebody else is going to do it for us, right? Because they're not.
No, and then just one thing to kind of add to that is just like everything you just described. On top of that, then you're seeing this kind of like growth and explosion of people kind of gravitating towards militias, towards
Right.
extremist groups. And then you had these polls coming out that are showing that Republicans are kind of like, I think it was about a third, right, of Republicans think violence may be necessary to save democracy. Never mind that like 75% of them don't even consider the last election to be valid, right?
Right.
And then you have like these generals warning about like how the military could play part in a coup because you have these soldiers that lack the civics education and critical thinking
Yep.
skills, which makes them more susceptible to these conspiracy theories and these like recruitment tactics of these extremist groups. So it's like a perfect shitstorm that's just descending upon us.
Yep. Okay, let me add one more layer to that, just to kind of to underscore it one more. In those same polls that talk about, you know, the number of like Republicans that are kind of will say violence might be necessary, you've also said the new this new Ipsos poll that just came out, NPR Ipsos poll that just came out. You also saw that now there's a creeping number of people either on the left, right, who are also saying, oh, I don't know, maybe it is going to come to violence, right? But what's even more concerning is that the majority of people, the people that are most worried about the state of our democracy, to think that democracy is at risk and is the risk of failing right now, are Republicans. Think about that. Is that the people, the very party that are attacking democratic institutions, they're looking to undermine voting rights, are there's an ideological and a propaganda push to say that our democracy is at risk, and they're using like, the big lie as a way to kind of accomplish this, which means going into 2022 elections and then again into 2024, that they're going to ramp up, they're going to be ramping up their base, saying that democracy is at threat, so we need to take it back. Right. And it's a delusion, right? They're going to use autocracy as a way of kind of quote unquote defending democracy, which really just means what we taught before: white supremacy and white white chauvinism. This is what it is. This white nationalism, which is crazy. So it's like, we need to get folks on our side to to be as clear about the threats of democracy as they are, from the fantasy version that they're facing on the Republican side of the aisle. So,
yeah, and just to kind of, I think we're talking about all this, and then you take a step back, and then you're just like, oh God, right? Like this is so much, right? But what I would say is it starts with local organizing, right?
Exactly.
And it starts at the grassroots level because, as we've mentioned before, I think there's been some deficiencies with how the Democratic Party and other kind of institutions that we expect to kind of, be doing more to kind of defend these democratic norms and democratic institutions and democratic practices. They're coming up short. So, again, like, we are like painting this doom and gloom picture, which I think is legitimate.
Yes.
But you have to start locally, right? And it starts at home. It starts in your neighborhood, your community, your school district.
Yep.
So, that's what it is. You just keep doing what you're doing and growing. And, I think at some point, it would be nice to have some kind of like countywide kind of like, meeting where like people from like different, even if we just start with like schools, like people from different school districts are kind of like sharing their experiences and like their successes and failures and like best practices. For example, like at Central Bucks School District, after those the anti-Semite and anti-trans bigots kind of like spoke at the school board meeting, and like the school board, right-wing school board members just seemingly just like accommodated them and didn't kind of like speak up. Like there was an amazing community response to
yes,
that. And that
exactly.
took a lot of work, right? That just didn't happen spontaneously. Like these people were, and I've spoken with some of them, like they were organizing for weeks and getting together on meetings online and in person to make that happen. So I think there's like a lot that we can learn from each other. And I think like maybe like what happened, like, how that was handled in Central Bucks could help people in Penridge, right, or in Ben Salem or whatever, give them some ideas of what, of how they might approach kind of similar situations. And then they can share some of the things that they've done successfully in the past.
Yeah, and I think things are moving in exactly that direction too as well. I mean, from my discussions with some folks who ran for school board, both here in Penridge, but also Central Bucks, Palisades School District, and beyond out in Berks County too as well. There are basically a couple good things have come out of that. Number one, I think those folks who worked in those campaigns, not just the candidates themselves, but people who worked in those campaigns, who were showing up for the school boards and all that kind of stuff, are convinced that organizing is the way forward. Right. And they're also convinced that it's got to go beyond just the school board. Right. That we need to like move towards like some sort of countywide movement. The other thing, and this came out a little bit in my interview with Diana Lagerman, who was a candidate for school board in Central Bucks, when she was on the show back in December, it basically said a lot of the candidates came, I think, confronted for the first time that the organizational structure of the Bucks County, say, Democratic Party and other kind of state and county Democratic parties was insufficient, to put it kindly, but actually was not prepared for the kind of organizing that needs to happen. And so I think that there's a growing number of folks that are feeling that, look, that if the Bucks County Democratic Party wants to have any relevancy, then they're going to have to learn to follow the organizers as opposed to the other way around. Because I've heard this again and again and again, where the Democratic Party, their DCCC, whatever it might be, they were kind of all hands off. That you had these kind of like paperclip and Scotch tape campaigns that were put together of just neighbors and organizers volunteering their time to go out and do there. And then in comes the Democratic Party and with their kind of great ideas, right? But wasn't based in the organizing that was happening on the ground. And that actually ran and caused problems in terms of the, and some of those campaigns. And the fact that they weren't taking the Democratic Party, the official Democratic Party was not taking their lead from those organizers on the ground, but was trying to kind of convince them of some other model that has continued to fail, right? So that alone, I think, is really important, that people on the ground are saying, hey, instead of looking to a party, we're going to look to ourselves, right? And we're going to look to the organizing with our neighbors and our community, and that is where we're going to have our party. And if the party if the official folks want to come along for the ride, we welcome them with open arms, but they're not going to stand in our way again. That's also absolutely critical, because look, we need to have the resources going to be put towards organizing and put towards building power, right? Not just kind of like reading some kind of like, highly paid consultants kind of, PR plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, one thing I did want to mention, I know we're coming up on time, we're already going to hear, but if folks haven't, pay attention to this, what goes on. This was put in my hands by a listener to the show. The Upper Bucks County Technical School, which is the executive director is by this guy by the name of Jeffrey Sweda. He was hired back, best I can tell, about 2019. Well, turns out that there's this document that has just come out from that is basically calling for his removal. Right now, the Upper Bucks County Technical School serves the Palisades, Penridge, and the Quakertown school districts. But apparently, the executive director is, and I read this at the beginning, but this is what they charge there, that says that you are being charged by school administration with incompetency, intemperance, persistent negligence in the performance of duties, willful neglect of duties, and or willful failure to comply with school laws and directives. What are some of those things, you might ask? Well, for example, he was got the supervisor of buildings and grounds, and they got him to purchase a log splitter at the cost of $999 for his personal use for chopping wood for his home and his friends. And he basically took paver bricks from the school for his own use and gave some to his friends. He fueled up his own personal vehicles while asking employees to watch out for him. He cut access to the security camera so people wouldn't kind of have access to him. He had what appears to be an inappropriate relationship with someone who had been a student at the school, right? The list goes on. So, this is, I was actually thrilled to see that this was actually make the light of day. I have not seen any reporting on this thus far, right? So this is why I wanted to make sure we got to mention this here, that this needs to circulate. And apparently Jeffrey Sweda was trying to fight this, even though he has admitted to almost everything within here. So I think people should be paying attention to this, because there is no way that somebody who's basically stealing from the school district, right, and is corrupt to the core should be at the executive director of any school. Not to mention the verbal abuse that he put his employees through. So There you go. So check that out. His name is Jeffrey Sweda, Upper Bucks County Technical School. I'll put a link to the document in the show notes today too, as well, if people want to check it out for themselves. The other thing, Cyril, I got to say that I was thrilled to see just this morning the latest profile of a progressive. The one, the only Rick Smith kind of made it into your newsletter. Was so psyched to see him there.
Yeah, that was great. That was a long time coming. Yeah, for those of you who don't know Rick, and you should, but if you don't, check out the newsletter. You can learn a little bit more about him, and then obviously like subscribe to his podcast or follow his shows, just which are like everywhere. Because he's, for me, the only just war is class war, right? And he's just like a working class warrior, and so are a lot of the guests that he has on the show. Rick is just a treasure, for working class folks and folks that care about democracy here in PA. His show's great. It's absolutely great. I'm honored that he's asked me on a few times before, and he's a big fan of your work as well, Kevin. Something that he mentioned.
Oh yeah, Rick. I mean, Rick is just like, he was my saving grace when I moved to Pennsylvania. Is like, I went to the PA Progressive Summit one year, I think, or maybe it was actually it was probably through my union is when I first met him. I met him at one of our legislative assemblies. And just kind of used there, had a table set up at one of our legislative assemblies, and we got to talking, and we kept on bumping into each other, look for kind of further collaboration. Sean Kitchen, who got his start here at Raging Chicken, eventually worked for Rick for a little bit, for a little time too as well. Rick has been doing, freaking God's work for as long as I know. And, right now it's all really coming into fruition. If you go to ricksmithshow.com, you can check out all his stuff. He's got a show on Free Speech TV now. He got picked up in WBAI in New York, KPFK in Los Angeles. He got a show now in Chicago and Minneapolis. And he's got a daily, I think it's launched. I think this is okay to say. He's got a daily national show in addition to his regular podcast that is going live if it's not already too. So check out all this stuff over at the ricksmithshow.com, and check out Cyril's newsletter. You can get kind of Rick's own words about it too. So pretty cool. So you said you got coming up, we're going to see the column coming out either today or tomorrow, looking at the interview of the woman, I'm forgetting her name, I'm sorry.
Leslie Ann Newman,
who wrote the book, Heather Has Two Mommies. Look for Cyril's comment on that. Got anything else, other irons in the fire, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm trying to finish up like a January 6th piece that kind of like frames it within the global far right movement. And that'll be for the newsletter. And then as well, I had a great conversation with a woman who was a member of the Jane Collective, which was an underground group in Chicago that provided abortion services to women and girls pre-Roe. And she was just fascinating. She was just really interesting. And, unfortunately, we might be going back to the future with what's happening with the Supreme Court, right? And if you missed it, I also, over the break, I had a couple of different articles, but there was one just kind of like looking at how El Salvador kind of provides a glimpse into what a post-Roe United States might look like, given that like the same groups, global Christian anti-choice groups that are funding challenges to Roe v. Wade here in the United States are the ones that are kind of funding these same efforts in developing countries with weaker democratic institutions. And right now in El Salvador, if you have a miscarriage or stillbirth, you're looking at 30 years in prison, right? That's the type of like misogynistic policy framework that they have, where doctors are actually now like, they've been turned into snitches because they fear that they can be tried as accomplices, right? If a woman loses a baby, right? So you can check that out, and we can put a link in the show
I'll put a
notes
link
for
too
that
as well. Yeah, and if people are looking for it right now, you can. I mean, if you look, well, I'll put a link in the show. It came out on December 8th. That was a fantastic piece. Do check that out. Yeah, and I should also say that this is where our hands are not clean in this country on this one, because very much this is the logical conclusion of the kind of death squad policies that the United States government fostered so long in El Salvador. I mean, some of my original activism when I went to college was working with in a solidarity movements with the people of El Salvador through CISPACE and through the Student Revolutionary Front of El Salvador, as we help fund death squads and these kind of extreme kind of religious, brutal like autocrats like down throughout El Salvador. And now here, the people of El Salvador are still paying the price for that.
Yeah, I mean, the school board members like in Penridge want to teach more about Reagan. I would love to put together some lesson plans about Reagan's foreign policy in Central America, supporting death squads in El Salvador whose members raped and murdered nuns, assassinated Archbishop Oscar Romero, or whether it was Reagan palling around with genocidal dictator Efren Rios Montt in Guatemala, where he carried out a scorched earth campaign against the country's indigenous Mayan population. So if you're listening, you want me to put together some materials, I could put together a reading list for some high school students in Penridge.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to come in and speak to any class as a guest speaker about why my first time I ever got arrested for civil disobedience was being chained to the Rayburn office building protesting a vote to go for funding death squads in El Salvador. So I'd be happy to lend my piece of history to that Reagan story. So to say.
Well, we're ending it on a high note.
Yes, there you go. There you go. Well, Cyril, I know we went long today, but it's great catching up. It's great to see you and talk to you again. And I'm with you, man. I'm here for the fight. I'm charged up, ready to hit 2022 in full steam ahead, man. So I'm glad to be right by your side, fighting the good fight.
Right on. Thanks, Kevin.
All right, you got it. So this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. This has been the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko. Yes, we're back for 2022. We're looking for lots more of these in the kind of weeks and months ahead. For now, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Make sure you tune in to our Friday show and back again on Wednesday and Wednesday. We'll see you then. See ya!